Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Empowering Research Through Responsible AI on ScienceDirect, which is sponsored by Elsevier. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now, I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Also, if you're interested in library technology, LibTech Insights, or LTI, is a content vertical from Choice that examines the day-to-day impact of library and education technology on academic librarians, researchers, and students. The channel provides practical guidance on technology trends and products, including AI and AI literacy, user experience, useful tools, and job profiles, all of which are written by and for librarians. So you can find out more about LTI and read the blog via the links in the chat. We send out one email a week with our latest posts and some handpicked tech news stories, usually in the realm of AI. Okay, so before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you like or would like to be addressed. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. And with that, we are ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Sabrina. It is so great to be here, and thank you for joining us, everyone. I am Rachel Zaleski, Product Marketing Manager at Elsevier, and I'm here with a couple of my colleagues, Emily Singley, our Vice President of North American Library Relations, and Judson Dunham, who's our Senior Director of Product Management for ScienceDirect. We are excited to share a groundbreaking innovation in full-text search and discovery with the launch of ScienceDirect AI. They will be covering concerns and perceptions of GenAI in research, challenges for researchers, and how ScienceDirect was developed by our team along with the research community. Please advance to the next slide. So this is the agenda I'd like to take you through today. We're going to start off with Emily, who will share how AI is reshaping content discovery, research workflows, and decision-making in libraries. Next, we'll review our principles guiding ethical AI development and usage, and how researchers and librarians can be empowered by responsible AI practices. Then Judd will talk about the way forward with real-world applications, including how AI helps with literature discovery, synthesis, and insights with an exciting demo on ScienceDirect AI. And finally, Judd will outline the different use cases for Scopus AI and ScienceDirect AI. And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Advance to the next slide, please. And now I'll hand it over to Emily to begin.
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel. Great to be here. Great to be here with you and with Judd. And so my role in this presentation is really just to give you a little bit of scene setting, some background. And I'm going to share some of what we've been learning about kind of how libraries and also scientists are thinking about as well as using generative AI. So sort of where are we today in March of 2025 in the Gen AI revolution, if you will. One of the things we did within the last few months is we had a survey where we surveyed both libraries and researchers and scientists and clinicians about how they're thinking about AI and also how they're using AI. And this first slide that I have here is what we heard from libraries and from library workers. And probably none of this really surprises you. You can see here a lot of concerns about misinformation in particular, and how AI and the use of Gen AI by their users, by faculty, by students, by scientists, by medical researchers, could cause errors or mishaps. So pretty legitimate concerns, especially if you consider that the tools that most people are using within the last year or so have been those kind of generic web-based chat GPT-like tools that aren't necessarily grounded in any kind of real resources or literature. So a lot of concerns here. And then also on the flip side, so that's sort of where libraries are thinking about AI. We also asked researchers and healthcare clinicians, so these are scientific researchers and clinicians, where they see AI and whether or not they're using AI. And this is a little bit of a different picture, right? So there's a lot of opportunity and excitement. And I'm sure you all are hearing that from your students and faculty, or seeing a lot of use on your campuses as well, that generative AI is going to help accelerate knowledge discovery. They see it's going to rapidly increase medical research. And I should point out that this survey was really with the scientific community, with the medical community. So that's kind of the perspective that we're getting here. But what I really found most interesting from this is that last 71% at the bottom there, where you see, but they expect that the tools that they'll be using in the future are going to be based on high quality, trusted sources only. So they're not going to be asking questions of answer bots that are just looking at like Reddit and the web and goodness knows what, right? They're expecting to have tools that are really looking just at the trusted research that they've come to rely on from libraries. So that was kind of like a aha moment for us, like, oh yeah, okay, that's what's expected. And then I want to go to the next slide here. So another thing that we've found is that researchers, scientific researchers in particular, 76% are already using some sort of generative AI to help them interrogate, read, understand, summarize, and analyze the scientific record, right? The scientific literature. That's a little bit concerning, considering that ScienceDirect AI hadn't launched yet, right? So we're going, wait a second, what are you using? So the tools that researchers are using up until now haven't necessarily been built for that kind of in-depth research, that it doesn't necessarily interrogate the full text of the literature. So these concerns that we hear from librarians makes perfect sense, right? Like we see faculty, scientists, researchers using tools that maybe aren't fit for purpose or right for the job. So that's just kind of a little brief background on what we're hearing from both librarians, also from the research community. I want to also give a little bit of context here, and I want to turn to why are researchers and scientists using Gen AI tools? Why are they jumping all over this bandwagon, right? And we think it's because, in our research and talking to researchers, because they have a very complex workflow where they're trying to do a lot of different things. They're a little bit overwhelmed. There's a little bit of information overload going on here. And they're turning to Gen AI to try and find some better ways to organize and streamline all of their workflows. And I will say too that one of the things we find is that their workflows aren't at all linear, right? They're sort of jumping around within this workflow. They might look at insights from the literature and then design an experiment, and then they might, in the middle of their experiment, run into an issue and have to go back into the literature to see if they can find someone who solved that problem. They're jumping around a lot. And we think there's opportunity here for a company like Elsevier, which sort of has solutions and products that hit many different parts of this workflow, to utilize some of the technologies with machine learning and generative AI to try and make this easier, better, more efficient for researchers. And in particular, we have, today we're going to be really focusing in on just one piece of this with ScienceDirect, but we also are looking at this across the entire spectrum of the research workflow. But for today, really the focus of ScienceDirect as a database that's literature of, scientific literature, we're looking at that reading, analysis, and design piece of the researcher workflow. So just to dig into that a little bit more, reading, analyzing, and gaining insights from the scientific literature takes up a lot of researcher time. And this is that information overload problem, right? Where we found out that there's 35% of their time takes up just trying to get insights out of the literature. And I think as librarians, we all know this, we've seen this, you've probably heard this from your users. So what are the consequences, right, of information overload? And I think it's important to sort of think about this. It's not so much just that you may not find the information that you're looking for, you might miss that important article. Think about what the consequences of that for a scientist who's about to develop an experiment and do some work to advance a particular field. If they don't find out that that experiment's already been done or that insight's already been found, they may waste a lot of their time and even end up contributing bad information to the scholarly record. So, and that can hinder scientific progress. So, right, so it's really important that people really be able to understand the literature in detail. And just to sort of sum up what I've been sort of going over here, we've seen, as I said before, that 76% of researchers, again, already using generative AI, but again, may not be using the tools that are best for the job. They might be using sort of more generic ChatGPT tools that are out there that are really just word prediction engines that may not be giving accurate information. And they're probably not using tools that are actually interrogating the full text. So that's what we've set up to try and solve for with ScienceDirect AI. And I want to wrap up before I hand it over to Judd, who's going to actually kind of dive into more detail on ScienceDirect AI. I want to talk a little bit about how we develop AI in general at Elsevier across all of our products and services. And this is about our responsible use of AI. So as a company across all of our services, all of our products, we are deeply committed to doing this responsibly. And our CEO, Kumsal Bayazit, who is pictured here, she's a wonderful woman, has said that safe AI is our number1 priority as a company. And we've committed to that with our responsible AI principles. I already mentioned the attitudes towards AI report, which I shared. So we're really trying to learn from the community. And we're trying to embed that responsible AI throughout our entire product family. And I just want to close with those 5 responsible AI principles. I always like to highlight these. And I always like to say that these are not just words on a page for us. I have seen how the product team and the development teams really live and breathe these principles. And you can learn more about these by going to our website as well and kind of dig into what they actually mean and how we sort of live these principles. And with that, I think I am going to hand it over to you, Judd, to sort of dive into ScienceDirect AI and talk a little bit about how we developed this tool.
Thanks, Emily. That's a great opening, and thanks everyone for joining. And I'm also thrilled to be here talking to you about this really cool and wonderful tool that we've built that we hope is going to empower the researchers at your institutions. My name is Judson Dunham. I am Senior Director of Product Management for ScienceDirect, and I've been spending the last couple of years of my professional life living and breathing this tool, ScienceDirect AI, and I'm very thrilled that it is now out in the world. So I'm going to spend a few moments talking a little bit about how we landed on the set of tools and features that we are calling ScienceDirect AI, which we built as a response to the needs, as Emily articulated, that we've heard from researchers and librarians, and our own views of how we can best apply this new technology to make research easier, faster, and more rewarding. So we have this most recent poll of top research libraries in the United States that shows that libraries are increasingly investing in AI tools and tech across a wide variety of issues. And I am personally thrilled to see professional development topping this list, as I know that there's been a bunch of great research published lately. In fact, I just saw a great article coming out yesterday showing how AI used in teams makes teams even more productive than teams working without AI, which follows up a great research article from the same people that showed that individuals working with AI were more productive than individuals not. I think that I've become a real big believer in this in the past couple of years, that when you apply AI responsibly and thoughtfully in a professional environment, you can simply be way more productive. And I think I think that the research is showing it, but I was also an AI skeptic for a long time. I've adopted it myself, and I've seen firsthand with my own work and my team how useful it can be as a co-creator and a helper. And I am certain that it can be the same for the practice of librarianship. And that's one of the most rewarding pieces of feedback we've heard during the testing of ScienceDirect AI, is the number of librarians, especially, who came around to believing in the benefits of generative AI through the use of the tool that we built. And of course, as a vendor, I'm also very happy to see subscriptions to AI tools and tech coming in second. But quite honestly, that's because I believe that the journey that we've had to build ScienceDirect AI together with researchers and institutions, I have also become convinced that this thing that we built will be a huge productivity boost for research and education. And I'm sure there are many other such tools that I hope will transform the process of research and education in a good way in the years to come. So I mentioned, several times now that we developed this in collaboration with the community, and I know that vendors love to throw around the idea that we build everything with the community, but in this case, it really is true. We could not have built this product that I'm going to show you in a bit without the participation of thousands of real researchers and the direct input from dozens of librarians from our beta test institutions all over the globe. This process that we went through to build this from the ground up involved literally thousands of direct signals from things like in-product surveys and feedback mechanisms of people individually rating individual responses they got, as well as filling out surveys of what it meant for them in their work, and as well as hundreds, and that's probably honestly an undercount, of direct one-to-one interviews with researchers and librarians. And this wasn't just, research. This was actual. This was crucial in developing the product. We had to make big improvements in the early days in terms of improving the responses that we were able to provide, and it was this feedback that helped us do that. And we've made huge strides in improving reported user satisfaction with responses and the tool overall, not because we are all such geniuses and so smart on our own, but because we found a way to integrate this feedback and make it a part of the daily lives of our product, technology, design, and data science teams, who've had access to these thousands of individual response and in-product surveys and hundreds of transcripts from interviews and librarians in order to make this product better every day. And I don't think a day has gone by in the last 9 months or so without some piece of feedback being directly fed into the product development process. It's a really unique level of input, and I'm probably talking about it too long, but I've been at Elsevier for many years, and I think that this is probably one of the most heavily tested and co-developed products that we have ever made, probably at least since Scopus. And I think that the results we've achieved speak for themselves. So ScienceDirect AI in a sentence, we set out to build a tool that enables researchers to surface, cite, compare, and explore evidence from deep within trusted peer-reviewed literature, and to make knowledge discovery more efficient, practical, and rewarding. This is the mission. This is what the entire extended team building this tool gets up and looks at every day when they set out to work on it. And this is the product that we think we've built. So I'm going to take a few slides now to talk about the different components of what we built and what it does, and then I will jump into a live demo. So we started with transformative search. And what I mean by that is we had a vision that I think Emily and I might have even been at a conference more than probably about 2 years ago, where we talked about, can we use this technology to get beyond, enable researchers to get beyond keyword search and just describe what they want and why they want it and what they want to use it for in their own language. And it's come about now that we can say that in the broadest sense, because ScienceDirect AI will accept queries and prompts in any language, and it's sometimes a bit magical to behold. The second box is really crucial. We enable precise citation by providing direct access to the source material for any generated assertion. And I'll go through it in a moment in the demo. But what I mean by this, and it's important, is that whenever ScienceDirect AI presents a generated assertion, there is always a direct link, not just to the paper, but to the underlying source text that the assertion is based on. And you'll see in a moment that this is what I'm talking about is actually snippets of full text articles. And I'm emphasizing it because it's key, and hopefully you'll understand why when you see it in action. But when we talk about responsible AI, this for me is an important example of how we mean it, not just in those individual 5 items, but really in the spirit of it. We are not providing a chatbot over ScienceDirect. We are not building a chat interface that will generate responses probabilistically based on all the text in the ScienceDirect database. We are using a large language model to do what I would characterize more as last mile summarization and synthesis of insights from full text in order to make discovery and reading easier and faster, not replace it. And it's worth repeating. This is in the words of one of our users, a search and verify tool. It is a tool that helps you find insights within the literature and get access to what you need in the source peer-reviewed full text faster. It is not a mechanism for chatting with the scientific literature. And I hope that that's clear and it becomes clear when I talk about it. But it's something that we spent a lot of time crafting, and the interface we built doesn't just enable, but it actively encourages users to go to the source material in order to verify it. And that is by design. The last 2 boxes really are the other sort of the 3 legs of the stool, the features that we've built. The first one is one that we call it compare experiments. And as it's called, it enables researchers to generate experiment comparison tables across 10 papers at a time. And I'll talk about that in the demo in a moment. And then finally, there's a reading assistant that helps with extracting insights from these full-length research articles and book chapters, which of course can be anywhere from 5 to 150 or more pages. And again, that also provides always direct one-click citations to source text, in that case, in the document that's being read, and not across the whole corpus. And again, I just want to emphasize, it's a reading assistant. It is not a reading replacement. So what we set out to achieve with this, we are not an organization that rushes headlong into innovation. We've taken our time building this tool because we want to get it right. And we want to be clear on how we can make innovation that's safe and trustworthy, because we believe that is the #1 asset that Elsevier has, is as a safe haven for trustworthy information on the internet. So we agreed a set of principles that we wanted to deliver against to make generative AI research tools that could be truly relevant and useful, but also safe and trustworthy. So we developed our solutions with the research community through, as I mentioned, extensive in-person, one-to-one interviews, surveys, and other techniques. We build our solutions based on what we believe that they want from that research, what researchers tell us they want, not what we think that they should have. And researchers have really told us loud and clear throughout this, and I'm really relieved to see this, that as the use of these tools has proliferated, as Emily showed, it's clear that what people want are better tools to help them more efficiently find and use the insights that they need to build their own knowledge, not a machine to do their jobs for them. And that's something that if you also look at some of the reaction to some of the tools that have come out even more recently that purport to sort of do all the research for you, that's just something that we don't think that researchers are clamoring for. So I am now going to transition to a live demo, and please excuse me as I manage a couple of buttons. Okay, if you cannot see my screen, please, somebody who's in charge, speak up. But ScienceDirect AI is not publicly available to everyone, so you can see the URL up here, but unless you're at an institution that currently has access to it. You will not be able to access this tool yourself. So as I said, the idea of ScienceDirect is that we wanted to, first of all, get beyond keyword search. So a typical keyword search might be 2 or 3 words. We wanted to let people say, just specify what they want, and specify kind of why they want it and how they're looking for it. So this is a great query that we saw from one of our users in the user test. Can inductively coupled plasma emission spectrometry help to determine which wastes have hazardous characteristics, such as leaching toxicity? And I love this query because it's sort of a multi-part query. It's quite complex. It's not in life science. It's in more of a material science, environmental science thing. And I'm going to open this thing here that shows the summary steps. This is something that we've built also over the past 6 months. It sort of gives you an idea of what it does. We have behind this are 14.5 million full text journal articles and book chapters. And that they are indexed in what's called a vector search index, which means they are indexed by semantic meaning of the words that are put against it. So the first search that's run is the words put in exactly, and also in a lexical search index, which means it will find snippets and documents with just these words. So this is one of the innovations that we had as we went along trying to improve the tool, is realizing that a semantic search is great. It's probably, for most use cases, an improvement over lexical search, but a hybrid search that uses both is actually better at retrieving relevant results. So what has happened behind the scenes is that search has retrieved 10 documents and snippets of documents from within the full text that are highly relevant to this query, and it is using 7 of them to generate the summary answer here, and it is returning the other 3 in a list underneath. So the summary answer is really was the first part of our product development process for this. The relevant information that has come back from that search is fed to a large language model, in this case, ChatGPT 4o, along with the user's query and a quite involved set of prompts that instructs it to generate a summary response of a certain length, always and only providing assertions when references to text can be, the underlying source text can be provided, and always citing every assertion. So what you see on the screen here is not snippets from individual articles. It is a summary that has been generated by a large language model using the underlying snippets as source material. And if I click on a reference, and we purposefully made this essentially look like a short research paper with references as researchers would be expected to use them, you can see that in this case, here's a snippet that was found in the materials and methods section of this article that was used as the basis for this assertion. So this is really the core of the solution. This is what people report saving the most time using, because it gives them not a final answer to their question that they can go off and never read another paper. It gives them a way to find the research that really matters to them, and also critically to identify when a piece of research maybe isn't relevant for them much more quickly than a standard keyword search document result list could ever do. So the core of it is the summary. Researchers told us over and over again that they still want to have access to the underlying document list and the list of references, which makes sense. It's like a bibliography. But the main user patterns we see on this is people finding something interesting in the summary that kind of gives them a broad view of what's out there, and then clicking through to the full text. And when they click through to the full text, the next thing that comes into play in ScienceDirect AI is something that we call the reading assistant. And the reading assistant is basically the same concept as the tool that I just showed that we call Ask ScienceDirect AI, except it works on an individual article. So instead of looking across the entire corpus of 14.5 million articles, the reading assistant focuses in on just this one article that you're reading. And as you can see, it brought my question over with me. Again, we believe that there's a ton of innovation we can do in the research process by simply using large language models to retain context and do things like user intent, divination, that can just make the whole process a lot easier and take some of the cognitive load off of researchers while still leaving them in control. And just like we have on the primary solution, every assertion that comes up in the reading assistant is backed with one-click access to source text from within the article. within the article, if you are using the reading assistant, what we see people doing often is it's not kind of a one and done, it's more of a conversation. So in this case, the value here is that this has allowed me to find very quickly some part of this article that's highly important to me, but I don't have to stop there. So I'm not an expert here. I see that this mentions RMLWA. That's interesting. Tell me more about RMLWA. So you can kind of go in and basically ask and get answers to any question you have that can be answered by the article. As you can see in this case, if I want to learn more about RMLWA, I see that it's red mud. So I can go up and find the source material for that as well. So this is how we see people using it. It's almost like a personalized, bespoke table of contents that adjusts itself to meet your evolving needs. And we see people using it on average. I think it's about 3.5 queries per use, which is pretty cool to see. And then I will show one more thing on here, which is the compare experiments table. And I'm going to have to talk over it while it loads for a little bit, because this one is a little bit more computationally intensive than the rest. So what's going on in the background here is it's taking of the 10 responses that were returned, of the 10 references that were returned, any of them that are a research article, it's going through it, and again, using a series of prompts, and in this case, it's a bit recursive, going through and finding for each research article, identifying every individual experiment or study, which, as you can see, most articles have more than one experiment study, and that's by design that we pull those out. And for each individual line of research in the paper, identifying the goals, materials, methods, results, conclusions that are mentioned for that experiment. And this is sort of the gory details of papers that researchers told us when we asked them earlier this year, once we'd gotten the beta product off the ground, what are some things that we could do for people that would really save them time? We had a researcher in the room with us at a workshop in Amsterdam, and this person was reading through a review article and came across a table just like this. And he said, I love it when I find something like this because it means someone has done the work for me. And I said before, we are not out to do your work for you, but in many cases, we can shortcut tasks like this that would take a researcher, if they're looking for, to get a broad view of what was actually done in these papers, something you can't get from an abstract. We can pull that information out and give it to you so that you can look at a glance and really dig in deeply into the detail of these papers without having to go in and read every single line by line, page by page, and PDF by PDF, and pull it all out and put it into Excel files and tables like we see people doing. And this is something that we were really excited about, and we were a little bit, not sure if we could do it, but it turned out that this was something that was well within our grasp, and this become one of the most loved aspects of ScienceDirect for our beta test customers. So I'm going to go back now to the slides. And Bill, if you could put the slides back up. Thank you. So I would encourage you to visit. We have an InfoSite website where you can see some more videos. I believe it's me talking over them, so apologies in advance. But you can check that out at your leisure. Hopefully that demo was interesting. I want to take a few moments to talk to you about what we've heard from some of our test users and librarians. And as I said, we've maintained a relationship with the research community throughout the development of this. And it's been one of the most personally rewarding aspects for me to have people say, in the early days, kind of go from, well, this is nice, this could kind of help me a little bit, which is what you often hear when you're, building a feature, to things like this on the screen. And I've been doing this for a long time. As I said, I've worked on a lot of products, and I have spent a non-insignificant amount of time as part of this project. I am ashamed to admit, rewatching interviews because of people saying things like this unprompted. I've been sort of gobsmacked by the response to this tool. This interview was special to me because this person, in another part of the interview, as I said earlier, said that this was a tool that had made her a believer that AI had something to offer her as a research librarian. That ChatGPT has been out for a couple of years, and it took ScienceDirect AI to bring this person over. And she was just really effusive with it, and I thought that was a cool story. And I love how her success with this tool had two direct benefits. One is that, her time is highly leveraged because she's saving the time of a team of people who'd otherwise waste it. And I think, knowing what reference librarians do, my wife was a reference librarian for a long time. I know that that's just a huge thing. And also, I think most importantly, it made her look good. Let's not pretend that that isn't super important to everyone. And on the researcher front, again, it's just been kind of a steady stream, especially in the past 3 to 4 months, of real people telling us how this work that we've done and this tool that we built has transformed their work. And the one on the left, I think everyone in the entire extended team probably has a fond memory of this quote the day it appeared in our feedback stream in Slack, because it's so powerful to know that you're working on something and that when someone tells you that the tool you've built has transformed the way they work, especially when it's people like researchers working at academic institutions. And I can tell you again, this is the first time I've ever heard someone say that something that we built literally transforms the way they work. And it's part of what makes me a believer that the moment we're at with this technology is similar to the internet. And I want to call out that, it isn't just all about time savings, although that is what certainly we like to, think about is how do we make things more efficient. It's obviously a key benefit. But what's really important in that quote on the left is how he mentions that the effectiveness of the tool has allowed him to do other useful things. He's allowed him to expand the scope of his research, investigate more things, and produce superior work. And that's the goal. We're aiming to empower researchers to do more of what they are the best at in the world, and that is advancing the frontiers of human knowledge. And I think that this tool has the potential to really do that, which is really, really special. And on the right is another kind of user that we want to empower, of course, is the line between education and research. A PhD student at Oxford who estimates that it's saving him an hour of research in his daily workflow, and that's probably a lot. That might be half the time he spends on his research. And again, for him, the benefits go beyond time saving. It's diving deeper into things, finding things you wouldn't have otherwise found. And we hear that again and again. And that combined with people telling us both how much they like the tool, how disappointed they would be if it went away, tells us that we're just really, really onto something here, that people understand how to use it and how to make the most of it to really improve their own outcomes. And it's been super rewarding, and we can't wait to do more of it. So I have a couple of sections left. I'm going to try and wrap it up so we have enough time for Q&A. I want to talk for a little bit about, obviously Elsevier put Scopus AI into the market. I guess it was last year or maybe even the year before. It's been out for a while, and now we put ScienceDirect AI out. So how do these tools sort of sit together? We really do believe that they're complementary tools, just like an ANI database is not a replacement for full text. Full text isn't a replacement for an ANI database. And what we've come up with to sort of describe this is we think of these tools that, they have two different purposes, just like Scopus and ScienceDirect have two different purposes, and they help researchers to navigate and use the literature across the whole research workflow. And we believe they can be used together best. And with Scopus AI serving as a strategic resource, enabling users to quickly locate, a broad spectrum of papers and information resources that they need to gather in order to get, started with their research. It's primarily used for understanding the broader landscape, planning, things like that. And the way we think of it is as sort of a telescope, getting a broad, high-level view of the research landscape to navigate the early stages of the workflow and support tasks like hypothesis generation, which they have a really cool feature that they've just released called Emerging Themes that does that, finding green space for new research. Think back to the three little pyramids that were on Emily's slide, which I'll show again, things in that area. We believe that that's really distinct and that Scopus AI is a tool that really helps with that. And on the other side, ScienceDirect AI, obviously being full text, focuses on in-depth analysis of the full text and also the material, the foundational material included in the 1.1 million book chapters currently in the tool. So that's a tool that allows users to synthesize evidence from multiple studies, obviously compare the results, identify and understand research findings in fine detail, and really just kind of get into what and understand what researchers have found. And we think of this as the microscope, zooming in on the fine-grained details of what was really done by researchers in the lab or on location, learning from how they set up and ran their experiments, things like that. that enable you to compare and contrast your own findings from your related research. So it's really useful, later in the research process when you really need to get into that level of detail. And we know, as Emily said, that's reading full text is what people spend a ton of time doing. And we're just really thrilled that we've been able to put the kind of insights we learned from building Scopus AI to work also in the full text. And again, researchers have told us here that they see a need for both. It's not really an either or. They need generative AI research tools that support both broad-based literature review and scoping searches and high-level summaries of findings across things that you would find in abstracts like in Scopus and other sort of author and citation metadata. And they need tools that help them interrogate the fine-grained details. So again, we've built these tools. They obviously look similar. They're using similar technologies. We collaborate a lot with the Scopus team. And we're making sure that as we learn things across each tool, we're employing them in both. But the underlying technology and solutions to support them are necessarily very different in the end. It's obviously a very different technical challenge, for example, to put 14.5 million full text documents into a vector database versus 50 million abstracts, just as one example. But they're fine-tuned according to the different information sources and things, but we reuse a lot of the insights across them, and we're trying to make sure that the experience is coherent across both. So as a recap, as Emily mentioned, we know reading remains one of the biggest unsolved challenges in the workflow, and that's because of the unceasing growth of the published literature. It's only getting harder. We know that generative AI has tremendous potential to help solve this problem. We see people using and demanding better tools to help them solve that problem. And we also know that simply dumping generative AI on something and deploying it irresponsibly creates a lot of risk, and that's something we want to avoid. So our aim is to give researchers the tools that they need in a way that minimizes risk and helps them transform their reading and discovery experience for the better. And so with that in mind, we've built ScienceDirect AI in a strict ethos that it must be built and tuned with researchers' actual needs and according to our responsible AI principles, which we have built into the entire product development process. And we think the result of our work is a feature-packed tool that uniquely works at the level of full text analysis, giving researchers totally new ways to find and extract insights from deep within full text. And this is replacing something that could only be done by arduous keyword searching and reading PDFs line by line. And at this point, we really want to transition away from building this tool up into something we could put forward to helping you get it into the hands of your researchers. So I want to bring back a slide from earlier in the deck as kind of a coda to how we view these three broad categories of research. As Emily mentioned, our analysis shows that research tasks can be broadly split into these three categories, roughly equal in terms of time required: the strategy and planning, reading analysis, and delivering and sharing. And we know that the last part is what researchers are really in it for, to share their new thinking with the world. And we have some great ideas for how we can work in that space as well. Nothing we've talked about today, but I look forward to speaking to you again soon, potentially about that in the future. And I think with that, we will transition to the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. Okay, thanks everyone for your amazing questions. We've got them here in the chat, and we'll go ahead and take a view of them with our speakers based on those that have been upvoted. So our first question here is from Andre, saying, I'd be interested to know in how the presenters have thought about the most recent news about Meta's use of secret library items to teach their AI. I have a book review that I wrote some years ago that showed up, and I know some of my fiction writer colleagues' stories and books have shown up as well. It's very concerning. Jed, I don't know if you want to take that.
I mean, yeah, I don't even know what to say to that, to be honest. It's disturbing. I would just add to that I've read that certain other big tech generative AI organizations have latched onto the current atmosphere, if you want to call it that, in the United States, and pushed for generative AI to be able to have free reign over all information anywhere for anything, for any reason, and no compensation for anyone. So I think that that's I have serious concerns about the reduction in the motivation for people to create and publish original information if it's all going to be hoovered up in this way. So I think it's irresponsible, but it's more of a personal opinion than a professional one.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that sort of highlights why it's so important to point researchers and students and faculty towards the more scholarly tools that are using retrieval augmented generation. You've probably heard that term, RAG, where as Jed described earlier, we're using large language models to point at the corpus of the scholarly literature that's in the library database, right? We're not going outside the library database. If you use ScienceDirect AI, I guarantee your book review will not be in any of the results unless you're in ScienceDirect AI, which, I don't know if you are or not, but it's just that corpus that we're asking the language model to analyze. So I think that these other tools that are sort of like hoovering up information, as Jed said, and then being used to answer questions without actually being pointed at actual scholarly sources in real time and actually searching actual library databases in real time is very disturbing.
Okay. Our next question is from Jennifer, related to what is Elsevier's stance on copyright in AI? And I think Emily, I'll send this one to you.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. And again, I think it's important to just to point out that we are only looking at analyzing the content that we have the permission to look at and to analyze and to provide answers from, which is the corpus of ScienceDirect. So we have agreements with all of our authors when they publish with us that grants us the permissions to do this kind of work. So we are very careful to stay within that corpus and within the permissions that we have. So that's why we've actually, one of the reasons why we started with Scopus, which is abstracts and sort of, not the full text. We took our time and made sure that we were okay within copyright and so forth to make sure that everything that we are doing is with the sanction of the the people who've written these articles.
Awesome, great. And our next question is from Jenna. I'll send this one to you, Jed. Is it only crawling articles published by Elsevier? Are there concerns about this introducing bias?
I mean, it's a fair question. We kicked around a lot of ideas for how we might approach this, and in the end, what we settled on is that, at least for this first version, we would include. If you were eagle-eye listening to me, then you heard 14.5 million. What that constitutes is 12.5 million. No, that's not incorrect. Sorry, 12 million research full-text articles published in Elsevier journals, for which Elsevier has a copyright, for which societies that publish with us have agreed to be part of it. So that's Elsevier, and that's English language, and that's content for which we have native XML, so mostly 95 and forward. We're working on going through the back file as well, but that's something that we haven't gotten to yet. It also includes 1.1 million full-text book chapters, also published by Elsevier. And then we augmented that with 1.5 million open access articles that were published under a CC BY or zero license from other publishers that are legally available to use in tools like this, and that a lot of such tools use. I personally had some concerns when we started with that and saying, like, both bias as well as lack of coverage. What we found really interestingly, and this is somewhat anecdotal, and I'd like to do more of a study on it, but I mention it just because I think you might find it interesting, that the process, obviously, of scholarly communication involves citation and building on previous research. And a ton of the insights contained in previous research are summarized and cited in introductions and other sections. And what we found, and we heard from people again and again, that finding an introduction section in an article that is highly relevant to them that summarizes a number of previous research articles is in many ways uniquely useful in ways that abstracts are not. And we actually included a number of abstracts in early versions of the tool. If you were around and part of our journey with us, you might know that we used to have a number of millions of abstracts in there. We took them out, and the actual reported satisfaction among users went up. So I don't know that we've really figured it out, but I think that it's a fair statement to make that, a tool that, had more content in it would be better. We are working on that. You might be aware that we have a content syndication situation with many publishers that we've been running for several years. Those publishers are not currently included in ScienceDirect AI, but we're always interested in broadening the content base. But all I can really tell you is that the people using it don't seem to mind. The reported user satisfaction with the answers they're getting, and the insights and the way it helps them, again, finding and reading literature seems to indicate that a pretty big corpus is still pretty good, even if it's mostly limited to Elsevier and some open access content.
Okay, great. Next question is from Jarvis. I'm curious about the precision of the tool. One issue I have seen with other AI research tools is that answers they provide aren't always accurate with the information provided from the provided citation. Can you comment on how you tested the precision of the tool and what you found?
Yeah, so I don't want to go into great detail on it because I could probably talk the next 10 minutes, but it's something that we obviously take very seriously, in Elsevier, that, that if we're putting out a tool, we better be sure that it's accurate. And I will say upfront, no matter if anybody ever tells you that their large language model tool doesn't hallucinate, that's a good signal that you should walk away from it, because as a probabilistic, indeterminate piece of technology, every large language model has the possibility to hallucinate, and ScienceDirect AI is no exception. But what we do is we run evaluation rounds regularly with internal subject matter experts as well as external subject matter experts. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of test queries that we have internally. You can imagine there's lots of PhDs running around within Elsevier who are available to evaluate the responses to their own queries and test queries. We also have a large language model-based evaluation process, which is something of a norm in the industry, that we run every time we make any kind of a system update, whether it's on the index or on the prompt and engineering and other things like that, to evaluate the accuracy, relevance, and completeness of generated responses. And we generally, I don't have the very latest numbers, but we look at two things. We look at, when we make a change, what do people say? And this was much frothier earlier in the process. It's very stable now. If we make a change, do users say that the responses are better? People can tell us if they get inaccurate responses, and we've responded to many of those. But through that internal testing, we're maintaining somewhere in the range of, I think, 90 to 95%. And don't quote me on that, but I should probably look that up the next time I have to do a webinar like this. Something like 95% of responses are rated as both highly accurate and highly relevant. So we have an evaluation process. This is pretty standard fare with this stuff. But I'll also say, just as one little interesting tidbit, as the models themselves have gotten better and more accurate than themselves, the tendency to hallucinate has gone down naturally. That's been really stunning to watch, especially we noticed with 4.0 when we switched to 4.0 that the accuracy of the responses improved dramatically, and I would expect that to continue. So we believe the combination of responses based on full text, improvements we've made to accuracy of the retrieval process, which we've done a lot of work on as well, to retrieve more accurate and relevant snippets, more relevant snippets that we feed to the large language model, plus the interface that enables people and encourages people to verify source text, is what we're doing as a whole package to keep ourselves on the right side of that issue.
Great. It looks like the next couple of questions are related to other products that are similar. So I'll send these to you, Judd, as well. So how does ScienceDirect AI compare to Perplexity?
I've been told a number of times to not comment on competitors, but I would encourage everyone to try Perplexity deep research on a topic that they're familiar with and judge the results for yourself. All I can say is that, as I mentioned before, and I would basically apply this to every certainly big tech competitor. One thing that I think Elsevier is pretty good at is understanding the research process, understanding the needs of researchers, understanding what it means to be a participant in the trustworthy communication of scientific and research information. And we put a lot of those kind of soft skills that maybe aren't as tech based as what maybe an OpenAI or a big billion-dollar company like Perplexity can do, we put those to work in designing the products. We've built up an entire sort of stable of highly skilled people across product, tech, design, data science, and everything in between, who are getting good at building large language model based and retrieval augmented generation type applications. And we are able to embed a lot of that expertise and a lot of that experience and deep knowledge of researchers in the workflows that we are building behind the scenes to make the magic that appears on the screen. I think, having used some of these tools myself, I can see how the processes and interfaces that we built are better because of that. But on a purely statistical note, Perplexity, as far as I understand it, covers most of the web, at least both what they are legally allowed to cover as well as what they are most assuredly not legally allowed to cover. Whereas ScienceDirect AI is really covering just the corpus of information that we've included in the SDA index from our full text.
Okay, great. And so another one here is from Andre around Emily mentioning ChatGPT a few times and the general lack of deep dives that you'll get into full scholarly work. But what about the Scholar GPT in chat? How does it compare to Elsevier's AI products?
I can't actually comment on that because I don't know enough about it. I'm sorry.
Same.
Yeah, it's a new
That's
one
a
for
new
me
one.
too.
I'm
Gonna add
aware it
that to my
exists,
list.
but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I can guess that the coverage is probably broader. The only thing I can really say is that another aspect that I don't think I've mentioned is that I mentioned 1.5 million open access articles. It's worth pointing out that we are not pulling in every open access article in the entire world that we could legally use. We believe that a tool like this, that there's a curation step that is important and a value add. If you're not aware of our content advisory board for Scopus, we are only pulling in content that is not Elsevier published if it is part of the Scopus dataset, which is controlled by a content selection advisory board. So there's a curation step, which I think my general understanding of a lot of tools, both big tech as well as more scholarly focused ones, are not putting that any kind of curation really at all. It's kind of like, well, let's get everything out there and put it in. And we don't think that's necessarily the best solution.
Okay. I see we have about 3 minutes left, so I'll take this next question. And then I think we'll move on from there, or maybe the next two. Let's see. So Terry says, I'm not expressing this very elegantly. Well, I think you are, but but what do you expect researchers to be the primary market for this tool? And how likely is it that librarians would be needed as search intermediaries? Maybe Emily, you can pick up on this one.
Sure. Yeah, great question. I think, Judd, you can probably speak to this too, but what we see is that researchers are the primary users of ScienceDirect. So of course, when we develop, we always have our primary researcher in mind, our primary user in mind, right? But of course, librarians, students, other people also use the tool. I would say that if you are a librarian in terms of being a search intermediary, I think that what I'm seeing is the role of librarians is shifting a little bit, right? Similar to the way it sort of shifted when we moved to the World Wide Web. Less about being a search intermediary or teaching the tool. And I've certainly stood up in front of classrooms and taught tools, right? And said, here's click here, click here, click here. Here's how you use this tool. And more about AI literacy writ large. What is a large language model? What is it doing? How does it work? How do you evaluate these tools? How do you know if they're accurate? So I think that's what libraries and librarians are really starting to focus on. And I think that's really what we're going to see more of, is making sure, especially for younger students, early career researchers, et cetera, that they know when they go to a tool like ScienceDirect AI, they know what it's doing, they know how it's working, and they understand the results that they're getting. I mean, similar to the way we started to teach algorithmic search when Google came out. Like, I remember doing that, like, that I'm old, okay? Like, I remember doing that in the classroom and being like, okay, this is how this algorithm is looking at results, and you have to understand that now to be, a well-informed researcher in today's world.
Thank you. I think we'll have to leave the Q&A at that. Thank you very much for all the wonderful questions. And we'll get back to just a final couple slides here. So just a few resources, as mentioned earlier, Elsevier commissioned and created really several studies and reports that have been mentioned by Emily specifically. And note that we are also offering Library Connect Academy. So it's actually a GenAI literacy course, which is free for all librarians. So please sign up for that. And in addition, we have the ACRL Futures Forum, which is coming up on April 2nd in person. So you'll actually get to interact with some librarians who are also addressing AI as well and have some conversations and Q&A. And then the final slide, I think. So yeah, if you're ready to explore, you can click the QR code and you can actually look at this, request a demo if you're actually interested in that as well and speaking to us. And Jen and Emily are also open to answering any of your questions. So thank you very much.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much to Rachel, Emily, and Judson for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to access today's slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.
Great.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.